Thank you folks so much for joining. I'm here with Hoyin, and the theme of the webinar is on when Hoyin and I and us actually started working together. It's incredible what he actually was able to do. And so we thought it's a great way to share Hoyin's story of how Remo went from 500,000 in burn to profitability in the last, I'm guessing, 12 months or so, when, if you correct me if I'm wrong. And all this happened during COVID. And it's been an incredible journey just seeing Hoyin operate in this. So we thought it's great to get Hoyin over to actually share this as well. In the meantime, I'll just give you a quick introduction about myself. So I'm Siddharth. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Spendflo. Prior to Spendflo, I used to run the business operations team for a company called Volta Charging. And prior to that, I'm a recovering banker. So that's a quick story about me, but just about Spendflo, we help companies buy, manage, and secure all of their SaaS tools in one single place with guaranteed savings. We work with an incredible set of companies, and we've negotiated with over 15,000 different vendors over the last couple of years. And during this journey was when I actually met Hoyin. But let me just hand it over to Hoyin to just introduce himself as well in the meantime.
So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me onto your webinar. Really an honor to come on and chat about this topic, which I think I spent a lot of time on. So a little bit about myself. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've done multiple businesses in e-commerce and SaaS. I've had a lot of experience previously in helping build remote teams for Fortune 100 companies. And my most recent project right now is with Remo, and what we kind of strive to do is create a virtual platform, events platform, where you're creating authentic conversations that drive meaningful relationships in the most human way possible. So we really focus on creating really immersive experiences that really are pretty much similar to in-person events, workshops, training, internal meetings and external meetings, whatever you have, we can do it. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'm super happy to be here today. Thanks,
Sid. Thank you so much, Hoyin. I'll just stop sharing the screen for now, and it's most of your conversation. The first thing I think everybody wants to know is, how the hell did you do this? How did you go from 500,000 in burn all the way to profitability in 8 months, 9 months when you did this, in the last 9 months? It was incredible, right? I saw you operate during that time, and we connected quite a bit. What were the two main levers that you actually pulled in order to do this?
Yeah, I mean, so in our case, we were a little bit more ahead of the game a little bit in terms of reducing costs, because we saw that there was a need. So for me, we're kind of a bootstrap company, and so cash flow and all that kind of stuff is really important. And so I guess I just had a much more financial, consideration and more attention to that. And so when we first started earlier in the year, we just identified. So the two major levers were obviously you just kind of look at all of your costs, and you get a full list. And you basically look at what are things that you can easily kind of low-hanging fruit. And by low-hanging fruit, you can kind of categorize things that are easy to do versus hard to do. And at the beginning, we try to do all of the easy to do things, like reducing professional fees. We were using recruiters, maybe not use recruiters. We were using a legal lawyer that was pretty expensive. Okay, well, let's see if we can find a cheaper one. And that can kind of give you the same thing, but they may not have all the bells and whistles and give you good, it may not have the brand or anything like that. Because we did work with some really top tier law firms. And we were just kind of you know what, maybe this is the time where we may not need it at this moment.
Yeah.
And so we looked at professional fees was a major one. SaaS costs was a major one.
Yeah.
And of course, we did all of that before looking at salary.
Yeah, Nick, something that stood out was you actually ended up like reducing 75% of your costs and 80% on your SaaS spends or something like that, right? Like in that picture. So like in this process, when you were going through it, you saw all your non-payroll costs, and that's what you went after first, right? And because generally this is what happens, we end up running, there is bloat at certain scale when especially you grew very quickly during COVID, thanks to the virtual event space, right? So I'm guessing there was a lot of bloat in both the spends at that point. And what did you do after the low hanging fruit as well?
Yeah, I mean, like the initial low hanging fruit was like, um, looking at contracts, like looking at stuff that you weren't using, looking at stuff that was duplicative, reducing seats, that kind of stuff. Like I can share
Yeah,
more about that deeper.
yeah.
And then after that was like, there's like more tougher relationships that you have to swap out,
Mm,
like professionals. Like sometimes lawyers are hard to swap out
yeah.
because the lawyer has like a lot of your background information.
Yes.
So that's a little bit harder to, but possible. And then after that, like looking at some of our core infrastructure costs,
Mm,
and that's not easy to pull out from. But we identified some areas that we made some huge reductions on our infrastructure costs. And for us, our platform, like infrastructure cost is a pretty large component of
yeah.
it, much more than a
Average.
SaaS spend actually.
Yeah.
So we really just like targeted some things that we eventually had to do some technical work on that, but it was worth it because we found some really one order of magnitude difference in our cost structure.
Nice.
So that also impacted our business model too. So there was like a lot of things that we were able to stack up against some cost reduction things that could affect our revenue, our business model, our cost structure, a lot of kind of things. And we
Yeah.
were able to justify some of that stuff by doing that.
And that actually brings me to the next question, right? Like, since you're bootstrapped and you've been able to do this, right? Like, what were the metrics that you were actually looking at when you were operationalizing all of this?
So on the revenue side,
Yeah,
so we're like a SaaS subscription model. Like
exactly.
Remo does MRR and it gets ARR, and VCs care about MRR, ARR,
Yeah,
obviously.
yeah.
So I cared about that too. But when it came to actually running the business, like
Mm,
I went back to basics. Like I
nice.
really, really went back to basics. Like I literally just said, okay, what's my cash flow looking like? Like what is
Mm,
the cash in the door? Um, so
like
I
net
use
cash
this
in the door.
term. Yeah, so I use this term called like net payments, which is
Mm.
basically some people call it free cash flow, but it's basically what's net, like revenue subtract refunds and discounts.
Mm.
So it's the actual money that you receive or the actual payments, like the
They're actually
payments that
receiving.
that 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 come in. And if you use like some subscription platforms, like they'll give you like the actual revenue payment that comes in that's been invoiced.
Yeah.
And then I used that. Now, so of course the finance in me, I'm like, so I have a financial background too. I used to work at a bank actually.
Yeah.
Um,
See, all us, we're recovering bankers, all of us.
yeah, the way how I looked at it was, yeah, that's important for reporting, but when it comes to managing the business, getting an upfront payment on an annual is a large chunk of it's money. I mean, it's basically just cash.
Mm.
So I looked at it a lot that way, and to be honest, that's a very simplified way of looking at it.
Yeah.
There's
But did
no
you?
financial complexity to it, but I use that because I needed to know what my burn was, and I
Yeah.
needed to know how much money was leaving the company, and in terms of the back balance, because that was like the most important thing.
Yeah. And
So yeah,
did you also look at like, I mean, that's the first thing that you'll be looking at, right? For example, we look at burn multiple, a little different. Like, I wish I could start looking at net payments, but it'll happen soon. But for us, we look at burn multiple. For you, look at net payments is what you think. But are you looking at CAC? Are you looking at your CAC
yeah,
payback?
yeah. So like what I said before, looking at revenue minus expenses and then looking at how much cash flow you have, like that's pretty defensive. Like it's a very
Yeah.
defensive move to kind of like protect your cash balance is kind of like
Yep.
what it is. On the CAC side, and LTV CAC, so we looked at that as well. So we basically just identified like I went in and I said, okay, give me all the channels. What are the CACs for each of them? What's the LTV we're getting on them? And then just chucked out all the stuff, all the CAC stuff that just was
Didn't
too
make sense.
high. It just
Yeah.
didn't. We just chucked it all out. We were like, all this stuff doesn't make sense anymore. Let's not mess around and experiment with all this
Yeah.
stuff. Let's just focus on the stuff that's
What
working.
was the heuristic you used? Did you say anything that I'm spending $1 on and it's not giving me $1 back at least? You said you remove, or were you even
Well,
more
like,
aggressive than that?
so there's different stages, right? In terms of like when it comes to marketing and go to market, like you've got your channels that really work well. LTV
Yeah.
CAC is really healthy, it's really good. And then you've got the mid-sized ones, which are still optimizing. So they're doing okay, but they're
Mhm.
not doing as well. You need to spend more time optimizing them. And then there are ones that are just like not like they're still pretty early stage in the experimentation process.
Got it.
So, we just had to look through all of them, all the experiments, all the stuff that we're looking at, and then remove, you know, the stuff that we really didn't feel it had that much confidence in. And in
Yeah.
other words, like we just took our lens and just the requirements for success, we just like really tightened it. So
Mm.
the bar was a lot higher. So there might have been some experiments that we were like had a lot of confidence and a lot of conviction that it could be successful. But then we said, okay, we can only choose a few. We can't choose all four or five or whatever. Like choose one or two,
Makes sense. And
and then just ditch all the rest of it for now.
yeah, and you did something like really counterintuitive. You went all the way PLG, right? In this time as well. Like that's very counterintuitive, right? Like letting go of your sales team is like almost like it's I can't even think about it. But so why did you do that? And what are the metrics you looked at in order to see whether you were successful in that journey?
Yeah, so we went PLG because, well, partially because our product was somewhat PLG to begin with. It's more of like we wanted to double down on that strategy. Let's put it that way.
Mm.
So,
Yes.
so we had some data already to say, hey, we would PLG. So our product grows by people coming into Remo,
Yeah.
experiencing the experience, they love it, and then they go do a trial. So we have like a metric where it measures like percentage of attendees that actually go on the trial, for
Ah,
example.
got it.
So that percentage is where we basically say, okay, well, if we did more events or we sponsored events or whatever, then a certain percentage would convert into
Right.
trial, etc. So we that was something that always kind of happened, and that's where we defined the success for it. So then our PLG motion then just basically doubled down on that loop, on that
Mm.
viral loop, and to make it even more um, do that. And the reason why PLG is because PLG is cheap.
Yeah.
It's really cheap. It's
Yeah.
just super affordable. You don't have to pay much in order to
Yes.
do that, but it takes time. It's like kind of a little bit like SEO. It takes time to kind of get that flywheel going. But
Mhm.
that was one of the reasons why we
You
we
double
we
down on
decided to
it.
go there. We
Nice.
decided to do that. Yeah.
Nice. And one of the things that you that I saw you do, and I was like, that I was like, I wanted to learn as well, was you actually went from a pretty large team, right? And you dropped down in scale and size from a team perspective pretty quickly, right, in that journey. And it's something that a lot of people are dealing with right now. It's like a bunch of layers going on. But one of the things that you did is you operationalized your your existing team, right? And you empower them. That's very important as a founder for you to do that. So I'm just looking like for everybody in the room, like what were some tips and tricks that you actually things that you did to operationalize this reduced team?
Yeah, I mean, it was a really tough process, obviously. Like it's nobody likes to kind of go through that process. It's not a positive kind of experience to go through.
Yeah.
And is for me, I think when you get a reduced team size, right? The first thing is like, oh, everyone who is doing the previous things they were doing, will give it to the people who are remaining. So the remaining people do more.
Mm.
And um, and what I realized was that there's a lot of things that are very nice to have.
Mm.
Like people are doing a lot of things, but they're very nice to have a lot
Mm.
of the times. And so, um, it depends on how like focused like your team was. Um, but having a reduced team allows people to actually focus more on what is the most important,
Mm.
what is the most impactful. So it sharpens like your list of things, your to-do list. So you would basically, what I did is I reprioritized what the teams were doing. and just became really, really like brutal in terms of like, okay, just focus on doing this. Like, oh, all, all these other people, um, we're doing all these things, don't worry about all of them. Like some things you just can't, you just won't be able to do. The way how I kind of see of it is like the flip side is like when we were growing really fast during the pandemic, right?
Yeah.
We weren't really doing all that stuff anyways,
Yeah.
right? So we were growing so fast and like we weren't there's a lot of stuff that wasn't being done anyways. Was it like, it's like a startup, right? We're all in this. It's
Yeah.
messy, you don't have the process, blah, blah, blah. I mean, were not able to survive then? No, we were able to grow and people were able to grow. And I think it's having that realization and I think communicating that to people, I think is important because then people are like, oh yeah, we did go through that. It was pretty crazy and we didn't do
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like it actually leads me to my next question, right? Like this is a conversation we had on when you look at people spend and when you look at tool spend and the low hanging spend, because a lot of tools are really uh they're intricate, they're actually in your workflow already, you can't really pull them out, it's really hard to do that. So when you went about making these decisions on whether to like say as you move to a lower price vendor, remove that tool, like move back to Excel sheets for all you care, like and the same thing is that you also have people, and people always need technology to work with, right? And like you can't attract people, and you still need talent to be available to you, and you still need them to be working with you as well. So that balance is really tricky. It's something that everybody faces. Like, what are your what did you go through in that journey as well?
Yeah, I think our conversation was really telling. Actually, you helped me a lot to kind of think through this. And so what I did was I kind of extrapolated a lot in terms of what you were telling me into like and apply into my business. And when is it? The question is like when is it to change a tool to a cheaper price tool or remove it entirely? Versus like um, cutting a person
Yeah.
or not. And so the what I did, what I ended up doing was so the main conversations I had, and I can explain this, was that we were considering migrating off of the CRM tool
Yeah.
and moving to a cheaper one. And because that's the CRM tool was incredibly expensive.
Expensive. Yeah.
And at the time when you're growing, like you don't really care about it.
Yeah.
But
Nobody cares about
but when
it.
yeah, nobody cares too much about when you're growing. So what I did was um I looked deeper into, first of all, what were the workflows?
Mm-hmm.
Where does the data sit? How many departments does it impact?
Yeah.
And when I kind of like spoke to people and just asked around, I realized that there was a lot of workflows being tied to the CRM,
Yeah.
CX, sales, marketing, even engineering in some cases.
Mhm.
And so I looked at all of the things that were touching and how much time it would take to move it. I then calculated like the training costs, the building up the workflows again, and all that kind of stuff. And I realized that that was would end up being quite a big distraction to the company, especially in a time where like we need to be hustling and need to be like maintaining revenue
Keep
and all
all
that
that
kind of stuff.
life, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then the next thing I kind of looked at was like, okay, if I did an analysis, like we basically did an analysis on like, okay, what things we don't have to do if we move, and what are the things that we have to do with spreadsheets. And what I looked at was, okay, so who would be doing the spreadsheet work? Which
Yeah.
departments were doing the spreadsheet work? And then I looked at those individuals who were doing it and the people around them that were with it. Are they involved in higher level thinking, or were
Mm.
they just mostly doing manual, or were they just doing relatively more manual work? If they were doing manual work already, then I think that's okay. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's our right to do that migration because it's worth them to then take on potentially something else that is just also manual. But let's say that person is doing some higher level thinking that you really, really need and value these team members or they're rock stars or you really need to retain those individuals. Um, then giving them more manual work is
Mm.
actually going to be a detriment because they may not end up liking that work, or there may not be as interesting to them, or it doesn't mean that they can grow as well. And when I kind of looked at that lens, I realized that that
Right.
I need to maintain their higher level of thinking
Yeah.
in terms of like the strategic stuff, like all that kind of stuff. I can't.
And you need the tool
It's
to
not worth
actually
it.
help them get that.
Yeah, and what the tool does is that it automates those things so that the person doesn't need to think about the low level stuff and they can think about the
Yeah.
high level stuff. So that was the trade off that I started to kind of like look at. So
Nice.
then the next step was, okay, if I can't cut the tool as much, then I really need to look very deep at the tool. The thing about CRMs, I think, is like they cover so many things, and so there's a
Yeah.
lot of different cost items in a
Yes.
CRM tool, I believe.
Yeah.
Especially with the one that we have, which is one of the bigger CRM tools.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's a lot of cost items. So that's a good thing, because if it was just
You
like
could
one
easily,
type of seat, if it was
yes,
like just one type of seat and there's 15 people, then the only thing you can reduce is the number of
reduce
people.
seats. Yeah.
But yeah, reduce seats, yeah. But if there's different cost items, like the one that's here that we're looking at, is half of the cost was email marketing contacts.
Yeah. That's the first thing. Like just move them to Excel if it's like
And then
take
just move them out of Excel. Then you could
yeah.
save like half your cost.
Yeah.
So then I look deeper into that, and then just that alone, I actually saved 80%,
Wow.
80% on
And
the CRM.
and that actually brings me to the next question as well. Like, do you look at SaaS spend as a percentage of sales or a percentage of expenses? Like today, when you're bootstrapped and you're running a really tight ship, right? Do you look at SaaS spend as a percentage of sales or SaaS spend as a percentage of expenses?
Because we are in a more of a defensive position, it's more recessionary
Yeah.
environment. I look at it as a percentage of total expenses,
Mm.
because that makes it more minimal versus percentage of sales. Because
Yeah.
sales could be pretty um, big, but then it might be a large percentage of your total expenses.
Yeah.
Um, and so I decided not to do that. I set a percentage that I wanted, which is percent of total expenses. And I said it's got to be below this amount. It's a bit more brutal. It's a bit more aggressive. But what I tend to do is like I tend to be really aggressive in my goals
Mm.
for kind of tackling spending and all that kind of stuff. But I may not 100% meet it.
Yeah.
I might meet 80%, because you're not really going to meet it at 100%, because people are
Yeah.
going to come back to you and be like, oh my gosh, we can't cut this, or oh my gosh, we can't do this, or it's really hard to do
Yeah.
this. Um,
I do this thing as well. Like I do like an 80-20 rule for my budgets. I only give out 80% of whatever I'm thinking of budgeting for to my departments. And I keep 20% because I know it's gonna get overshot at some point.
exactly. Exactly.
I kind of do. I've been doing this for now for a while, and like it's a nice hack actually. Just like immediately, it'll get them to. It at least makes me think. One, yes, there's more money in the bank. I can operate a little bit more, but like it makes the teams think a little bit more, frugal in their mentality on what needs to happen and
And
nimble.
there's also needs to be a mindset change too. I don't know, like, because when I first presented this, and people were like, oh my gosh, I don't want to cut, or nobody wants to cut. And
Nobody
so they're
wants.
always encouraging you not to cut.
Yes.
Um, and so there needs to be a mindset change as we go into a different economic environment. And that has to start with the expense exercise. And
Yeah.
so that is actually the front line in changing people's mindset. Because when you
Yeah.
say, I only have this, you got to cut that, then they really, really have to think much more deeply about their activities and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I felt being more aggressive is better, because it changes people's mindsets into like being more frugal. Because that is the mindset that we all need at this moment.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just pause here. Folks, please feel free to ask either Hoyin or me any questions you need. We're here to answer them for you. Just from just two founders who have gone through this journey, but also anything more specific that you need, feel free to ask us anything in the Q&A section. But we'll keep going in the meantime as well, right? Just to get to the juicy bit, I would say, right? Like, which is we went through this journey with you on how you actually went on ahead and optimized all your SaaS spends, right? And it was a lesson that honestly we learned a lot, and we saw that how you were actually running that process. There were a couple of things that you did which were very interesting, but the first thing I think we always recommend is that turn off auto renewals, right? Like that's like stop all your renewals right now, immediately, because only then will you be able to have a conversation with your vendors at the table when you're going through with it. But something else that you really did was you were pretty ruthless, right? In that thing, in the sense that you were pretty ruthless in terms of the ask, right? In terms of the ask of saying, hey, it's at 100K right now, I need it to be like 25K, right? Like it's crazy. That's a ruthless ask. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to get your sense on, like, it wasn't unrealistic as well. Like that's the thing. Like you were ruthless but not unrealistic with the vendors. So how did that? What was your strategy when you were actually going through that?
So, I mean, I'm a SaaS company too, right?
Yeah,
So retention is like a number one thing for me. So retention is gonna be a number one thing for everyone else,
yeah,
with the other vendors. So, but which are also SaaS companies or
yeah.
anyone really. I personally think when in a recession, the buyer has the most leverage to reduce costs. They have
Yeah.
the most leverage, and the way how I kind of approached it was, number one, like you guys should retain me. And the way I also looked at it is, if there were a large company, like a really big one, then I know that they have the money to survive and that they
Mm,
would want to retain their customers in the long run versus just going for short, money, because
mm.
they can weather
Very
through the
smart. Yeah.
storm and then come back and then increase price later. And so, you know, the reason for reducing cost or reducing price is very simple. I mean, you just say, hey, as you know, the economic environment is not great. Everyone's reducing costs. People are laying off people, so we need lower costs because we need to survive. And it's been asked by our investors. It's been asked by
Um,
our stakeholders. Like, I've got a target to make, and if you can't meet my target, then I got to go somewhere else.
yeah.
Straight and simple. And I let my all my vendors know that in advance, because then they can communicate that to their managers, immediately. Like, there's nothing that the manager can say. The manager's facing these questions all day every day, right? So the
Yeah.
faster that you're able to tell them, like, this is my target, then they will start kind of working on getting approvals to get to that level. Now, we've done that, and I've done that, and I said, look, I need to be at this number, and it's probably 20% of the original number, of the original number, or something like that. And it's you got a lot of the leverage because they could lose you, and acquiring a customer now is way more
It's
expensive than retaining it.
yeah, yeah.
So I would, you know um basically mention a lot, like, hey, you guys really have an opportunity to retain us as a customer. We really like you guys, but you know we're just in a really tough position right now. we
Mm.
we 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 can only afford this much. We've been quite successful in,
Doing that, yeah.
with Spendflo, obviously, with you guys' help, in order to get to that number, and
Yeah.
kind of negotiate. So we've been, yeah, I mean, like, it's also a good opportunity for you to look at other options too,
Mm.
and look at other options and say, hey, other options are providing this price. And there's so many SaaS companies, right?
Yeah, this is
You've
like
got
an
the
average
higher
of
price. Yeah,
9 different competitors for every SaaS tool out there. I think it
right.
became 15 in the last like 2 years.
Yeah, so there's so many alternatives. So there's going to be a cheaper alternative somewhere, somehow that's much more earlier stage than the existing player, the dominant player. And so you can always look back at these upstarts, these upcomers, right? And look at their pricing, and their price is going to be cheap. So you can always, point to that and say, and go up to them and ask for a quote. And and getting quotes are super easy because they want to give you a quote because
Yeah.
it's new business for them, and
I
it's really
think
hard to get new business for them.
the
Yeah.
hardest part, I think, with getting quotes from vendors is just that you have to have the discovery call, you have to do the demo call, you have to do all of this work. And I mean, at least over there, like that's where someone like a Spendflo can actually like help, right? Like we have all that data in one single place for you to actually get that. But I know how difficult it is to get those competitive quotes because you have no idea, like the time you're going to spend getting all of those quotes is also like a lot in that journey as well. And one thing you also did was like a rule on payments, nothing upfront. You went monthly, and you said, hey, like I'm trying to get like net 120, net 90 payment terms on all my contracts, right? Like just cash in the bank. That's something that you did. I mean, really well in the last couple of months, and I think you're still holding to it, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. So no upfront payments. I don't mind paying more monthly. I just don't want to have less cash. So distributing your payment across, like, so what we did was like do a lot of annual contracts. So we say, hey, we don't mind signing up an annual contract. You want to do even multi-year contracts? We're like, sure, if you want me to sign a multi-year contract, fine. But it has to be monthly or it has to be quarterly. And you got to give me you got to give me the lowest price that you can, make
Yeah.
me pay monthly. And that was effective in like lowering the amount, which is
Yeah.
helped me a lot considerably. Um, and yeah,
That
yeah,
makes sense.
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
I wanted to I think just quickly pause here and open it up for the Q&A. But before we do that, I just want to my marketing team will kill me if I don't say if anybody's looking for a free savings analysis on all your SaaS spends, like we did this with Hoyin and the Remo team, let us know because it just we have benchmarks on what you need to be paying for your SaaS tools at different scales, at different volumes. And it'll give us a good idea of where you are in your journey, right? And you're in that SaaS procurement journey and your SaaS optimization journey. So if you're looking for that, let us know. Happy to help you right after this. But in the meantime as well, we're here to like ask questions. And one of the biggest, I think, themes that we're seeing is what what are the challenges you're facing today with respect to cost optimization, right? Especially be it SaaS, be it non-SaaS. What are some things that you're really facing today that maybe Hoyin can help answer as well? I think Hoyin, you had a couple of questions as well in the meantime as well when you were going through this journey. And when we were working together on this, what were some things that you had in mind, right? Like where did you go ask for help? What are the places that you went to learn about all of this as well? Because I'm guessing this is the first time you've gone through this as well, right?
Yeah. I mean, like I did a lot of competitor research,
Mm,
um, trying to figure out like what are some alternatives. Looked up some negotiation books, trying to figure out how to negotiate
nice.
better. Um, and then like, I mean, and then we were able to kind of, I mean, expense reduction obviously is a very important thing, but you know, team is small and like you don't have enough time, and so figuring out what the alternatives are and going through that takes a lot of time. And I think we needed help around that area for sure. Like, who are the competitors? That's another thing. That's another very frequent question that I asked.
Yeah,
And
I think
and how do they really
the
stack
team
up?
gets you that data like all the time, right? Like, from all your stack, I think.
So yeah, I mean, and there's other questions that I asked. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, we are using a platform to help us with like our stock options and cap table, for example.
Mm,
And we use like a pretty one of the top tier ones, I think, which a lot of people would use and would know
Yeah.
if I said the name. Um, but then you know, the question that I had was like, is do people move off and change these stock option vendors like that manage your stock options, your cap table? And I heard from people that people typically don't. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, why is that? Because I've casually talked to another company, and they actually have like a migration tool that helps you migrate off of this platform very
Mm-hmm.
easily. So I was like thinking, well, if they have it, like all these other guys should have also have it too, because it's in their best interest to like,
Yeah.
get people off of like the main dominant player. So so it was interesting that no one has considered doing that yet. And I was just like, well, why, kind of just kept challenging it, like, why not? Like maybe there's something I don't know. So that's like a big question that I asked, like, and now I'm looking at, other alternatives. And in fact, I've now found an alternative that is actually more beneficial for my company because we're fully remote. And one of the things about like, stock option, like cap table stuff is when you do stock options for different people in different countries, it's like really a pain. Like
Oh
each
man.
country has different, requirements and different ways of doing things and how the taxes are done, blah, 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 blah. Like this is a huge problem. Like this is a really big problem. And so I found, we found one, with Spendflo, I think,
Yeah.
that actually was a good fit for us. So I was like, wow, like actually, it might be a double win. Like it's a better fit and
And
also reduces cost.
yeah, yeah. And I think you did this to your marketing stack, and we found one of the tools that you're using right now, like on your marketing stack, for example, is like, I mean, we've used it as well at this point, like from like the dominant marketing player in the space to there's a bunch of them that nobody just knows about them. But the thing is, they're actually more value for the money that they're actually going to pay for it. It's something that we see all the time. But one of the things that also is a challenge is that how do you actually calculate that true cost of savings, right? When you're actually making these moves. So moving from one vendor to the other is always tricky because of data and the implications of like using the tool and all of that. But like, how do you actually calculate the true cost? Because just dollar savings doesn't really drive the end goal because you're also looking for like value, right? From that.
Yeah, so I mean, I divided into three areas. There's the first two are pretty obvious, which is you get the direct cost savings of the difference of the price between the two vendors. So that's just comparing
Yeah.
the price. That's easy. So that's number one. But then that's what saves. But then there's also things that cost, like, sorry, it saves but works against the savings, like basically cut into the savings. And then
Mhm.
so the second most obvious one is your migration cost. Like how much
Yeah.
does it cost to migrate from one to the other? But the third one that I realized that is very hidden that nobody talks about is what I reframe it as time to retrain on a new system
Oh yeah.
and also the time to get used to the system. Because all of that migration stuff is a huge distraction from doing what your main OKR is for
Mm.
that quarter, for the year maybe, unless migration was a part of that OKR.
Mm.
Otherwise, it's a distraction. So
Yeah.
so the way how I looked at it was when I asked people to develop a time frame, like a timeline, I asked them like, okay, how much prep time does the key individuals need in preparing for the migration? So because
Mm.
those people could be doing something else. What's that? Second is what is the migration time frame like what's the training, like set up, train, and like set up to train, like as far sorry, this is all post implementation, by the way. This is just training the people, right?
Mm.
So because those people are training and learning something new, they're also getting distracted from their main OKR. And
Yeah.
then the third is getting used to the system. So this is after training. After
Okay.
training, people are still like, okay, well, I don't know how to do this. I got to review some content and blah blah blah. So like, there's that time as well. So that time I just calculated in hours, like in hours, and then looked at the
The cost per hour, and I'm guessing you do the math.
cost per hour. Yeah, cost per hour. but then I also looked at if it was like a salesperson, for
Ah,
example, then I would look at how much sales I'm missing that I'm not getting.
mm.
So when you look at that, then you can see, okay, well, what is this really worth or not?
I think just wanted to obviously Hoyin, like thank you so much for like taking this time, right, and spending it with us. And it's been a pleasure working together. I know we've been working together in the virtual world, but can't wait to just grab a drink one day in Hong Kong and
Yeah, I would
maybe
love to.
wherever, right? And get this done. But folks, for anyone looking to host virtual events, please check out Remo and Hoyin and the
Thank
team.
you.
They've been
Thank
doing an
you.
amazing job. Platform looks beautiful. And if you're ever looking to like save money, we're here at Spendflo to actually help you in that journey. We've had folks like Hoyin in that journey as well, and a bunch of other companies. Thank you so much, folks, for taking the time. Please let us know if you can answer any other questions. We're here on email, and you have a great day. Thank you.